Oh, there goes my phone. It's okay, I don't need it. 皆さんこんにちは、マルレモノヘンです。でもマリと呼ばれてもいいです。Welcome back to my channel. And as you probably would have guessed by the way I started this, we're talking about something a little bit different today. It is not necessarily writing related, although there is writing involved. I was on Instagram the other day and I was just scrolling through and I noticed that one of the people who I follow is learning Japanese. And they have just started and were looking for tips and tricks and things like that to help get the ball rolling. And so I thought, well, I'm coming up on almost 11 years. Actually, my birthday is also, in addition to being my 25th anniversary of being alive, it is the 11th anniversary of when I dedicated myself to Japanese. And so I thought it would be really fun to sit down and talk a little bit about why Japanese of all languages. That is a question I get so much, but talk about that, but also provide some tips for those of you who have been interested in Japanese, who have been kind of scared to try it or have been discouraged from trying it, and give you tips on how to get started and what to do once you get started. So that is what we're talking about today because I love Japanese. So here we go. I was introduced to Japanese when I was about 13 years old. I didn't start learning it formally until I was about 14. And when I say formally, it's because the first year I started studying Japanese, I did it by myself. I had no other outside instruction. It was basically just I went to the store, bought a bunch of workbooks, worked on it, watched TV, listened to music, things like that. I was completely 100% on my own when I started learning Japanese. And the thing with Japanese is that people ask me about it all the time is why Japanese? Why are you learning Japanese? I had been searching for a language my whole life. I had never wanted to be, monolinguistic. I always wanted to be bilingual. I always wanted to be fluent in another language. And so I had searched literally across the world for a language to learn, to be my second language. And so I looked at Swedish, I looked at Swahili, I looked at French, I looked at Spanish, I looked at German, I looked at Russian. I was all over the place. I tried Chinese at one point. I've been eyeballing Korean. I've just always been fascinated with languages and how languages form and how they're spoken and how they're structured. And I love languages. I'm so passionate about languages. I had always wanted a second language and I just could not find the right one that really spoke to me, that really clicked, And so my friend, a lifelong friend of mine, was speaking Japanese to herself one day, and I was like, I've never heard this language before. What is this? It sounds really, really cool. And she told me it was Japanese, and so I asked her to say a few things in it. She said those few things in it, and I was like, this is an awesome language. I've got to give this a try. And so I went to the store, bought a basic writing book, a basic grammar book, and I just remember opening it up to that first page and it just clicked. I was like, yes, I found my language. It was the most amazing feeling. And 11 years later, here I am. I still can't say to people that I'm fluent in Japanese because there's still a lot left for me to learn. My parents will always say, oh, our daughter's fluent in Japanese. And I'm like, I can speak it. I can understand it, but there's still so much left for me to learn. So it's hard for me to be like, yeah, I'm fluent. No, I'm not. I'm still working on it. It's still a work in progress. But to love something so much that you're still working on it 11 years later, that's impressive for me. Because usually I'm like, oh, this phase will die out. No, Japanese has stuck and it's staying. So I really love it. I think it truly is such a fascinating language. And through Japanese, I have discovered so many things. I have a love for Japanese history. Watching the history of the country as it shapes and molds into what it is today is just so fascinating to me. And also a deep appreciation for Japanese culture, Japanese religions, Japanese food, of course. I love Japanese food. I never ate fish until I started learning Japanese. And now I will just eat up straight raw salmon. Nothing on it, no rice, no nothing, just popping raw salmon in my mouth because I love it and it's delicious. And grilled eel over rice is one of my favorite foods of all time now. 12 years ago, that was not the case. I would not touch fish. And because of Japanese, because I was like, this is a country that I am really interested in and am one day going to go to, which I have to eat what they eat because they're an island nation. They eat fish. A lot of fish is incorporated into their meals. Gotta eat fish. And so that's kind of just how I got over it. And now I eat fish like freaking crazy. I love fish. It's delicious. The Japanese really did open up a lot of doors for me, kind of not just about like learning about another country, but also about myself and finding that this was a really big part of who I was and something that I was proud of. And I will give a fair warning that for some reason, when you tell people you are learning Japanese, there are going to be 1 or 2 people in your life who think it's the stupidest thing you could have ever done. And I've had people tell that to me. So the way you just have to deal with those people is just, you know, just let it roll off you. You know, because why should they care that you're learning Japanese? You know, if you're doing what you love, if you're interested in what you're doing, do it. Don't listen to them. So ignore the naysayers is my first tip, I guess. So now, because I am almost 11 years into this Japanese adventure, or Adventures in Japanese as my high school textbook was called, I am going to just get into some tips for anyone who is interested in learning Japanese, who is learning Japanese, and you're just starting out. I'm just gonna get into a couple of things that really helped me when I was starting, especially when I was starting on my own, and hopefully they will be helpful to you, and I just hope you guys have fun with your journey, honestly. So first and foremost about Japanese is don't let the language intimidate you. When you look at Japanese, it is very scary. And the comment that I get all the time from people is Japanese is one of the hardest languages to learn. And I'm going to combat that with, no, actually, it's not one of the hardest languages to learn. It looks like one of the hardest languages to learn. And the reason why it looks like that is because there are 3 different alphabets that you have to learn. You have your kanji, which comes from Chinese characters, or which are Chinese characters. You have your hiragana, which are the simplified Chinese characters. And the katakana, which also comes from kanji, but is used for foreign words and for emphasis. So yeah, there's 3 alphabets that you have to learn. But before you panic, the nice thing about Japanese is that when you look at it in Romanized letters, everything looks how it sounds. Japanese is actually a very phonetic language, and there's a flow to the language. There's a rhythm to it. And it makes sense the more you learn it. And so what you learn then is that those characters, the hiragana and the katakana, they represent a sound in that flow. And that's just kind of how Japanese is. It's a flow, it's a rhythm of a language. And that's honestly why I think it's really cool, is because it was the first language that I learned that felt like it was more like a song than a speaking style. So don't let the language intimidate you. Don't let how it looks scare you off. Because you're going to start small, you know, that's just the nature of languages. When you're learning something new, you're going to start small and slowly work your way up. So don't even worry about all of that just yet. Don't worry about how hard it looks. You know, you focus on where you are and work on that, and then slowly incorporate more into that, and then you'll realize, yeah, Japanese really isn't that hard. Another thing that has helped me over the years, and I still do this, always practice your basics. Always go back to the basics. Even if you are way advanced ahead and you are super fluent in every speech style there is in Japanese, always take time to go back and rebuild your foundation, because that is the most important part of language learning, is having a strong foundation. If you skip over any of the basic grammar, if you breeze through hiragana and katakana and never feel like you have to do it again, eventually it's going to crumble and you're not going to be able to have a strong platform to stand on when you're trying to hold a conversation, because things that should be natural are getting away from you. And I'm not saying that to scare you guys or anything, but that is something that's very important, is having that strong foundation. So if you do falter, if you get to the advanced, you have something to lean back on. For me, I ended up taking beginner level Japanese twice, and that was not by choice. The first time I took it, actually 3 times technically, because I took that first year where I taught myself, and then I went into a formal setting, like a school setting, and it was just everything all over again. And then when I got to college, the only Japanese classes I could take were like the beginner classes again. And so I just was like, okay, so I did the basics 3 times. I'm not saying you have to do it as much as I do, and you don't even have to go to a class for it. But every once in a while, just brush up on your hiragana, brush up on your katakana, brush up on your basic grammar, because that is what will save you when you get to the more complicated stuff. That's what's going to help you when you transition from using hiragana to kanji. It's going to help you when you're transitioning from easy grammar to more advanced grammar. It's just a nice thing to have. It's just something to fall back on when your brain... because my brain has many times in class in front of my sensei. Another tip is find music in the language that you really like. Like I said earlier, the thing about Japanese is that it feels much more like a rhythm that's more rhythmic than a lot of other languages I've tried, and the music reflects that. So if you find music in the language that you really like, learn the lyrics, read them in Romaji and Romanized letters, read them in Japanese, just follow along just so you have, you know, you can hear it and see it, and that'll help you memorize. Just listen to as much music as you can, as you want, and find a genre of music that, or a band or a group or an artist who you really like to listen to. There are a lot of very talented and very fun bands, groups, artists to listen to. And so just find that, you know, find that music that you enjoy and listen to it and study the lyrics and learn the sounds and learn to sing along, because that's actually how it will help you learn pronunciation. That's how I learned my pronunciation, was I just listened to music and I would try and match my voice to theirs. And my final tip that I will leave you guys with before I head out of here today, you might have seen coming, is watch Japanese television, movies, dramas, anything. Just immerse yourself in the language. And Japanese anime, a lot of people go one way or the other about anime, but I will actually argue for anime that it can be good listening practice. I would not necessarily advise repeating everything you hear in an anime though, because they don't always speak very politely. But listening to the speech styles and listening to how different people say things is really good listening practice, and it really helps you learn the different layers of the Japanese language. And watch Terrace House on Netflix, because if you want real conversational Japanese, if you want to know what that sounds like, watch that show. It is trash TV, but it's so much fun to watch, and it's good listening practice. So points there. Find a movie you like to watch. I really like the live action Rurouni Kenshin movies. Find those, watch those, watch, you know, just anything you think looks interesting. Even if it turns out to be a crappy movie, you're that much better at your listening skills. So those are just a couple of my little quick tips for beginners who are learning Japanese. I am so excited for all you guys who are starting on this journey, who have begun this journey. It is a very fun one, and I really hope you guys stick with it, because Japanese is really just one of the most fun languages. I mean, I can't speak highly enough of it. It is really one of my great passions in life and something I've dedicated so much of my time to, and I just love every minute of learning Japanese, no matter what it is, whether it's music, movies, writing, reading, anything. I love it. I love Japanese, and I hope you guys love it too. So if you guys are on a Japanese journey, comment down below and tell me where you are. And if you know how to, you're more than welcome to comment in Japanese. And I am just so excited to share these tips with you guys. If you guys want to see more Japanese related videos, please let me know. I love talking about Japan. I love talking about Japanese. And so if you guys want any more of this, I don't know why you would, but if you want any more of this, let me know. I hope you all have a great time studying the fun way, of course, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye! Also, I'm gonna have to go ahead and dedicate this video to an actor a Japanese actor who I was very much a fan of, who has passed away recently. Miura Haruma-san. He was a very talented guy and he will be greatly missed. Thank you for all of the amazing movies and dramas you gave us, Haruma. They were just such a joy to watch. You were such a joy to watch, and, you know, for Haruma. Bye guys.